Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's meeting. We will get started with public hearings. The first is rezoning Z9422, which I believe is being withdrawn. Would the planning staff like to comment on that or tell us what's going on?
Hi, good evening. Hannah Reckel, Planning and Development. Yeah, so the applicant withdrew the request C9422, so no action is needed from the council tonight.
Okay. Thank you. The second one is the Business Investment Grant Program. My understanding is that is being asked to be deferred. Is Evan Raleigh here to address that?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Yes, Mayor, the request came in after the public hearing was set at our November 21st meeting by the company to delay. So we did not run the advertisement, and we will be seeking to set that public hearing at a future meeting of council.
Okay, thank you very much. The third item is federal housing grants, our annual action plan for fiscal year 24-25.
Good evening. I'm John Niffenegger, Federal Programs Manager with Housing and Neighborhoods. Tonight, I'll be providing a brief presentation on the annual action plan, during which I'll be discussing goals and priorities and highlighting some of our programs and community engagement efforts. So, what is the annual action plan? As an entitlement community receiving federal funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the city is required to submit an annual action plan each year. The action plan serves as an application for federal funding, provides a budget and framework for annual production goals, and directly aligns with our 5-year consolidated plan. The 2024-25 action plan will be the 5th and final year of our current consolidated plan. The consolidated plan identifies 3 goals and priorities to address the need for more affordable housing, services to help our residents thrive, and programs to connect those experiencing homelessness to permanent housing. This table shows our projected funding for the upcoming year, which totals almost $30 million. As you can see, most of the funding, $25 million, is local, with federal funds accounting for just under $5 million. The next slides highlight the 3 goals outlined in the consolidated plan, their respective programs, and how they're funded. To increase the supply of affordable housing, our programs include rental development, an example being the Village of Washington Terrace, pictured here, which is 162 units of affordable housing, down payment assistance, and homeowner rehab and repair programs. These are funded with CDBG, home, and local funds. To increase services to build self-sufficiency and sustainability, our programs include the CDBG-funded Community Enhancement Grant, which awards funding to nonprofits to provide public services to low and moderate income Raleigh residents. An example would be Southeast Raleigh YMCA's Workforce Development Program, which helped equip 90 young adults with the skills needed to obtain new or better paying jobs. To enhance the homeless to housing continuum, programs include rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, emergency shelter, and other services for those experiencing or at risk of homelessness. These are funded with ESG, CDBG, and local funds. Families Together's Bridge Housing Program is one example, which helps families experiencing homelessness move into permanent housing. After tonight's public hearing, the purpose of which is to receive input on housing and community development needs, a draft plan will be created and published for public comment in March. There will be a second public hearing in April, after which the plan will be submitted to HUD in May. In addition to the 2 public hearings, there will be multiple opportunities for the community to learn more about our work and provide input. We continue to promote the recently published Affordable Housing 101 booklet and video, which received an award for outstanding public education materials at this year's statewide NC Affordable Housing Conference. Cool. This work is vital in bringing awareness to the city's affordable housing programs and our strategies. Something new this year, we held 2 public meetings prior to tonight's public hearing to educate and hear from the community. During these meetings, we had engaging and lively conversations with residents. Additional meetings will be scheduled this spring. As always, residents can submit written comments to the department, and for the 2nd year in a row, we created a public input survey, which is open through December 15th. This year, we launched the survey earlier, and as of this morning, nearly 700 residents have participated in the survey, with responses continuing to come in. Residents have emphasized support for the creation of more affordable housing, programs to assist homeowners, and support for those experiencing homelessness. We've already received more responses than we did last year, which was 400, and are ahead of the peer communities we surveyed. And this concludes my presentation. Council is now requested to conduct a public hearing, after which you'll be hearing from me again in April. Thank you very much.
Before you go, any questions for staff? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I am going to open the public hearing. We have 6 people signed up to speak. Since this is 8 minutes, I'm going to ask if you would try to limit your time to like 1 minute and 20 seconds, so everybody has equal time. What I don't want to have happen is one person comes up and takes up all the time. So if you could set that for like, I'll keep track of the full 8 minutes. Robin Scott is the first person on the list. Is Robin here? Okay, you just all got more time. Regina Earp. DeMonte Crawford. If you could keep it to 2 minutes, make sure, let me see if, who else is here. Danica Lee. Is Danica here? Michelle Joyner. Okay, and Jay Campbell. Okay. You could keep it to 4 minutes then, because we have 2 people present. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Melton. Great to see you. I've had the opportunity to take the survey that the gentleman was talking about, and I feel like the survey was very informative, very interactive, and my hope is that we see more residents take this survey. But I stand with you all this evening to just address one concern that I have, and that concern, bear with me one moment here, is regarding the Emergency Solutions Grant. I feel like the $255,000 is a little less, especially for the large population that we have here in the city of Raleigh. According to the Raleigh Rescue Mission, over 1,200 people are experiencing homelessness as we speak in the city of Raleigh. There's over 99,000 residents of Raleigh who are at risk of homelessness. And when we think of providing emergency funds to our residents, I personally feel like $255,000 is a little too less. My ask is that we increase that number. That can be a conversation amongst council, but I believe that if we can increase it, we can assist a larger number of residents, not only just the residents, but individuals who are homeless right now. As we speak, there's a waiting period of 4 years of individuals for Section 8 who need that housing right now, not yesterday, not yesteryear, but right now as we speak. So my hope is that we can get the Emergency Solutions Grant risen so that we can provide help today, not tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay Campbell?
Raleigh's bus rapid transit would be a great project for the city's stance on climate and transportation policy if it weren't such a leap backward. Has the city dismissed the impacts of displacing our working class communities along New Bern Avenue, Western Boulevard, and South Wilmington Street? We work here, we study here, and we have a right to live here. By displacing these communities, not only will the city be continuing a legacy of displacement for Black, immigrant, and working class people, the city stands to further contribute to climate change. Redevelopment without plans for affordable housing is gentrification. Gentrification causes our local working class communities to be forced out of their homes, encouraging suburban and rural sprawl. That means more cars on the road, more working class people paying for gasoline, tires, oil changes, brake pads, all known to be costly expenses for our wallets and the environment. Climate change is here, and our storms will only get worse. Insurance companies will mark up policies in areas chronically affected by floods and hurricanes. That will soon include all of Raleigh and many cities along the East Coast. So even the few homeowners left will be out of luck when insurance companies short them out of adequate coverage. That, or we watch insurance companies go bankrupt trying to repair the damages from a frequent barrage of storms. Does the city really think our old, under-resourced, overpriced housing system will keep any of us safe? We need strong, sustainable, reliable, resilient public housing. We need innovative, beautiful, diverse, fair public housing. The city's efforts with the construction of 100 units at Kings Ridge is a great first step. But 6,300 households are on the wait list for public housing, many at risk of being homeless. 6,300 households on the wait list. That's enough to pack Red Hat Amphitheater and then some. We need investment in housing from our public sector, and allocating these federal funds to public housing along the BRT's southern, western, and New Bern corridors is a great effort in mitigating the effects of gentrification while giving working class people access to quality public transit. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just see if anybody came in late. Robin Scott, Regina Earp, Danica Lee, or Michelle Joyner. Okay. I will then close the hearing, and we will see you back here on this topic in April. Next item is public nuisance abatement, demolition of unfit building.
Good evening, City Council, Madam Mayor. Bryce Abernathy, Housing and Neighborhoods Code Enforcement. I'm bringing you a property at 2628 Iman Drive to you tonight. You may remember I brought this back in May for unfit for human habitation ordinance. I'm going to give you a brief little rundown of the history of the property and how we got to this point. We started working with the property owner and getting the repairs made to this property in late 2020. We didn't actually start our official case until June of 2022. Property went vacant in July of 22, and it's been vacant for 1 year now. Again, in May, I brought it to council, and we adopted the unfit for human habitation ordinance, which essentially made it where she couldn't live there anymore. The housing code within the UDO directs us, if the property's been vacant and closed for a year, if the owner has abandoned the intent to repair, and it can contribute to blight in the neighborhood or added safety concerns, then I bring it to City Council to ask for a 90-day repair demolish ordinance. That's based on a 50%. If we think that the repairs to the property are going to be less than 50%, that directs us to the 90-day repair demolish ordinance. I would like to add that we do run property research several times during this process. And the most recent research that we did, a pending foreclosure sale popped up for December 19th. So that is on the horizon, but that process can take months. So I'm here if you have any questions. We can review some pictures. The property continues to kind of deteriorate. No repairs have been made, no permits pulled. You see in several locations, you can see the backside of the drywall on the inside of the house. And that's been, open to the elements for probably going on 3 years. And if you have any questions, yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Patton.
Yeah, hi, thanks. A couple questions for me. I think we've communicated this, but I've gotten some neighbor concerns that people are actually back residing. When was the last time you checked the property?
So we go out officially. The inspector is assigned once a month to go out and walk around and make sure the property stays vacant. We've been going out there a little more frequently with this particular one. And, the door's secured, the main parts of the house are secured as best they can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's no real thought that there is actually someone still residing here?
No.
Okay, got it. And we've seen this, we saw it for unfit for human habitation, then we saw another nuisance abatement on this property?
We have cleaned up the property several times, which resulted in the lien confirmation for a nuisance abatement.
Do you have an idea how much lien is already existing on the property?
I think we've done that 2 or 3 times. I would have to go back and look. I don't have that information right here with me.
Okay, gotcha. And then, so if this were action today, in 90 days, the city would contract this home for demolition, and it would say as a vacant lot?
If there was no new owner that comes from the foreclosure and it just nothing was going on, we would contract out a demolition contractor who would go out and take care of and remove the home, and I would come back with a lien confirmation for the demolition.
Okay, and then it would just sit as a vacant lot for
Right.
in perpetuity or until
Right.
it's sold again?
Correct.
Okay. Got it. Do you know how much a lien confirmation for a demolition is generally
It
speaking?
kind of depends. You know, it's a lot of the time it's done on weight. If there's asbestos in the property, I don't think this house was built when the asbestos was still around.
Yeah.
And the cost of that has gone up with everything. It's same as everything else. So it's kind of hard to say it right now.
Got it. And have we had any contact with the resident between then and now?
We've made phone calls, and I believe she may have actually signed up.
She signed
in
up.
See the
opposition.
name. Yeah, I was just curious if there had been any other.
And we've spoken to, there's two owners, husband and wife. We've spoken to both of them.
Okay.
And left messages
And they're
several
like, so
occasions.
they're aware.
Yeah.
Feel confident they're aware of this. Okay. All right, I'm all set.
Councilmember Fort.
This is a question, I guess, for the city attorney's office. Are there any legal ramifications if there's a pending foreclosure action? If we take any action?
As long as we give the proper notice, they certainly have the right to come in and redeem the property, but the statute only requires that we give notice.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to ask, is Estella Webster here? Estella Webster? Well, no. All right, the person who signed up to speak is not here, so I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to issue the 90-day repair demolition ordinance, whatever it is.
Do we have okay, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That was Councilmember Black.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have rezoning Z 8421 Millbrook Road, District A.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Sarah Shaughnessy, Raleigh Planning and Development. The applicant was not able to attend this evening, so I am happy to give the presentation. I believe one member of the public is signed up to speak, so I will leave it to you whether you want to hear the presentation and open the public hearing or defer the case until the applicant is able to be here.
Seeing as the mayor has to step out, Councilmember Black, I think this is your district. Do you?
Let me talk into the microphone. I did have questions about this. It was mostly about some of the concerns I had about the connectivity issues and that the site only has one exit point onto Millbrook.
Do you want to do the hearing then, or do you want to defer to the applicant can be here?
Well, the question is for staff people, but
Sounds like we should get the presentation.
Did the applicant ask for us to defer?
They have not asked either way. They are just not present this evening.
Let's proceed. There is someone from the public signed up, and I want to be respectful of time. I'm not sure if they're here. Is Marion Campbell here? Okay, let's go ahead and proceed with the hearing, then we'll do the presentation, then we can get the questions answered too.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a request to rezone about 13 acres on either side of Millbrook Road, just east of Six Forks Road. The request is to rezone from R6 to R10. It is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall, and Planning Commission has recommended approval. Here is an aerial view of the site. Surrounding land uses are mostly low-scale and moderate-scale residential. Six Forks is designated as a frequent transit corridor, and there is some office and commercial use along the corridor. Also nearby Sanderson High School and Green Elementary. Some views looking into the site. I know when the public hearing was scheduled, there was some question about the actual use on the site. We did confirm with the applicant that it is residential. There are about 59 units in one in the Colony Park townhome apartment complex, which is on the north side of Six Forks, and 60 units in Midtown Park on the south side. There is one leasing office in each. So the change here would be to add about 24 additional units. The setbacks are the same in R6 and R10. Again, consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with a future land use map designation of moderate scale residential. A number of consistent policies here. No inconsistent policies, and Planning Commission, again, voted unanimously to recommend approval, saying that the request would enable additional housing units, which may be built in a wider variety of building types. So again, happy to answer questions you have for staff.
Councilmember Harrison.
Perhaps you can't answer this, but I'm just curious, is the plan to redevelop the site? Is the plan to add whatever the difference is, in number of units?
The applicant has said that he would like to just add 4 additional units. That is what he told Planning Commission. There aren't any zoning conditions in place that would guarantee that, but he has stated that that's his intent.
And the current units there, are they considered to be NOAA, naturally occurring affordable?
Yeah, they were built, I think, in sort of mid-century. I think rents are relatively affordable compared to the rest of the area there. Yeah.
And so the way this case is, there's no protections for those. I mean, the site could be completely redeveloped if.
That is a possibility. Yeah, there are no zoning conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I haven't been able to catch up with the applicant either. I reached out about the same questions and then some questions about traffic connectivity, and I was hoping to get the answers today. But one of the concerns that was raised to me was about the connectivity issue of there only being one entry or exit point for all of the units and then adding new units and onto Millbrook Road right by Six Forks Road, which is, as we know, very congested throughout the day. So I was just curious to see what the plans were, if they had anything in place for.
I do not believe they have any plans in place, but I might defer to my transportation colleagues if you have questions about what would be required in terms of connectivity.
Yeah.
We ask, who's the applicant in this case?
He is the property owner, Seth Wolfman. So he owns both Midtown Park Townhome Apartments and Colony Townhome Apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Tartalo with Transportation. Do you have a specific question regarding access beyond what you said? Usually it will depend on the level of redevelopment and what sort of site review that would trigger in terms of if there's additional requirements for connections or not. There are additional streets in the street plan, but there wouldn't be any construction required in terms of those connections unless there was a big redevelopment, essentially. So it really, without knowing what the applicant has in mind, there's limited things I can tell you today, but if you have specific questions, I could respond to those.
That was the only thing. Just I know that there's 2 different parts that aren't connected, and each one only has one entry and exit point. And I think there was 20 different units that they were building, or around 20. So just I was wondering how that was going to impact and what any plans, but I wanted to talk to the applicant about it. I think the city can only tell me what the process is if and when something happens, as opposed to the applicant. But I do appreciate that. Thanks.
Councilmember Harrison and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Just to confirm, it appears as though there are already 120 units built on the site, and their current zoning, they could already build 144 units. So they have the opportunity already to build an additional 24 units?
Yeah, so part of the request, I believe it's a non-conforming use because of the building type, and this rezoning to R10 would bring them into conformity and allow them to redevelop in the way that they want.
Is there another way to do that that doesn't necessarily change the number of units?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I was just going to add, Mayor, while you were out, we had a discussion about whether we were going to have the public hearing since the applicant isn't here. If someone did sign up in opposition, they are here. But I do think that some of these questions we may need to hear from the applicant, so we may consider just holding this after we do the public hearing. It is odd for them not to be here. I would never not show up to court if I had a case on the docket. So I think maybe holding it might be generous for them, but that may be what we want to do for Councilmember Black to and others to get their questions answered. But the member who signed up in opposition is here, and we want to be respectful for time.
Okay. I do have a question too, and sorry I had to step out. So by right, they can build 124. Like, so how many more units?
I believe, let's go back.
Yeah, you said 124.
168, yeah, is what they would, under the proposed zoning R10.
Okay, and did they put any conditions in here?
They have not, no.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to open the hearing then, and Marion Campbell has signed up to speak.
So I feel like I'm signed up to speak in opposition, more in question than opposition, because we haven't heard anything in the neighborhood from these people as well since pre-pandemic. And during their during the pandemic meeting, they said they just wanted to develop 4 basement things. So we thought that had already passed. The concerns from the neighborhood, especially Sedgefield, which is on the south side of Millbrook, is we have a cul-de-sac at the end of Sedgefield that ends in Raleigh, that we do not want it to be a through road to Raleigh, because people come down Millbrook 60 miles per hour in a 35. They miss the apartments. They go down Sedgefield, which is 10 houses long, and at 45 miles per hour, and then jump the curb into the apartment complex. So we really like our cul-de-sac. At least it slows down people from going too fast down our dead-end road into those apartments. The other things I have concerns of is if this is going to be developed, the rainwater for that area goes into a cul-de-sac that the neighbors on Sedgefield have to keep up. And as it is right now, the rainwater in that apartment complex is not going out of their parking lot, and it's just kind of sitting there. I don't want to have to deal with taking care of their rainwater because they're adding more apartments. And then, as you've already said, traffic. We're having people hit going across Millbrook as it is, trying to get to the Food Lion from the one side. And Millbrook is just a mess between Six Forks and Falls of the Neuse. There's nothing to slow you down. It says 35, but people are going 65. And there's not a light, there's nothing there. So it's not a safe neighborhood to walk. And if we add more, it's only going to get worse without some sort of plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question, ma'am?
Excuse me one second. Could you just note there's 5 minutes and 31 seconds left in the public hearing, please, just for the record.
Hi, I just wanted to understand a little bit better about what you were mentioning. Sounds the water collecting on your cul-de-sac that you're maintaining.
So the cul-de-sac doesn't have water collecting on it, but the apartment complex does have water collecting on Raleigh. What happens with the water in that apartment is if it goes downhill, I'm sorry. I got to use my hands.
That's okay.
So Millbrook is here, Wendell is here, there's a valley. The apartment complex is between that on the south side of Millbrook, goes almost to Wendell. They are almost at the beginning of that valley. That valley has a culvert that runs through it from the apartment complex through to behind the houses into Fairleigh. And at Fairleigh is when that culvert goes underground. So that culvert is managed by, it's not part of the property of anybody on Wendell. It's only on the Sedgefield side. And we do not have an HOA. So it is managed by basically the 4 homeowners that have it behind their house, and the apartment complex. And there's a lot of bamboo along the side that somebody in that apartment complex gave us in the last 40 years. And there's a lot of vegetation from the apartment complex side of the road on the cul-de-sac behind the houses that goes over into the cul-de-sac. And we've tried to get the city, we take a chainsaw to it and deal with it ourselves as 5 houses, because the apartment complex isn't dealing with it, the city isn't dealing with it, so we're gonna deal with it. And we're gonna be able to have stuff at our houses.
Sure, sure. It does sound like there might, I'm kind of trying to look at Wayne. It sounds like something's going wrong here. Like, it doesn't sound quite right. I don't know, Wayne, if you want to investigate, you don't have to come up to the podium.
I've talked to the city about the cul-de-sac because it was put in by, or not the cul-de-sac, the culvert, because it was put in by the developers. It is owned by the HOA that went defunct when Millbrook went through the neighborhood.
Okay.
In the 80s. So.
Okay, so it's
There's a culvert put in
so it's technically in
68.
the stewardship of the HOA, but the HOA just doesn't exist anymore.
Hasn't existed since the 80s.
I got it. Okay. Wayne, do we have a process for this? Like how we can get it back into someone's stewardship?
Sure, yeah, I'd be glad to explain. So this apartment complex was developed before the city had stormwater controls. So there are no stormwater controls. Any redevelopment scenario, existing impervious area could be replicated without stormwater controls, but any new impervious area would need to have stormwater controls. And there is a documented structural flooding case, so that kicks in the provision in the UDO whereby stormwater controls would have to be designed to handle up to a 100-year storm. So that would provide some additional protection. Now, the channel the lady was referring is on private property behind those homes, so that is under a private maintenance. Now, they could potentially be eligible for some of our programs like drainage assistance. We'd be glad to come out and do an investigation, ma'am, if that would be helpful.
So redevelopment on the site, addition of new impervious surface would trigger stormwater interventions at our current standards.
Correct.
So the 100-year
Only
storm.
for the incremental increase of the
Oh.
impervious area.
Okay. So just for okay. I gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Branch, did you have a question?
I did, but Wayne covered it. And the fact that they're going to go in and look into it, I think that's the part I was going to bring up and ask.
Okay. All right. I guess what I'm hearing is there's an expectation that the applicant will come and address concerns. If the applicant can't come, he should hire an attorney who will represent him. If that could be conveyed to him, we will hold this open. But I don't know that there's going to be an appetite to continue holding this open without some answers.
Understood, yep.
Okay, did I capture that correctly? Okay. All right.
Do you want to continue that to a date certain?
January 16th would work. That should give Councilmember Black hopefully an opportunity. He will reach out and we can get some answers, but we're expecting him or a representative at that meeting.
Yes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, next we have rezoning Z2223 Trailwood Drive.
Good evening, Brown and Reedus with Planning and Development. The next case on the agenda is rezoning Z2223. The rezoning request is for an assemblage of about 11 acres at 1,000 and 1,100 Trailwood Drive. The request is to rezone from planned development with a special residential parking overlay district to residential 6 with conditions, keeping that special residential parking overlay district. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and Planning Commission recommended approval. So the site is located just east of the intersection of Avent Ferry Road and Gorman Street. To the west of the site is Lake Johnson. To the east of the site is Lake Raleigh. The site is majority wooded today. There's an existing, the Walnut Creek Greenway Trail is constructed and existing along the northern property line of the site. There is about 7 acres of the site is floodplain. The applicant has proposed some conditions here, the first being that development will be limited to 40 units. They are committing to the construction of a multi-use path connecting the future development on the site to that existing Walnut Creek Greenway Trail. A minimum of 6 acres of undisturbed protected area will be kept as defined in the UDO. And then they've committed to providing a minimum 40-foot building setback measured from the property line, shared with 1116 Trailwood Drive, which is the southern property line. Within that 40-foot wide setback, they have committed to providing a number of plantings to provide kind of a buffer from that adjacent property. And then finally, one of the following green stormwater measures will be included for any Tier 3 site plan, either a bioretention area or permeable pavement. Here's a look at the change in entitlement. So the residential unit count is going to be limited by that condition number 1, capping out at 40 units. The requested district of R6 is consistent with the low-scale residential future land use designation. There are a number of consistent policies, especially having to do with development in frequent transit areas. The Planning Commission did recommend approval unanimously, finding that the request increases the amount and type of housing that could be built on this site, and that being located close to future transit service and existing community benefits. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me before you open up the public hearing.
Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, I have a few, and some of these might be better answered after the applicant presents. But you mentioned that 7 acres is floodplain, so 7 out of the 11.3. And they are saying that they will protect, or undisturbed would be 6. So by default, wouldn't it have to be 7 because we cannot build in this floodplain?
So it's an approximation, the 7 acres, just by looking at IMAPs and kind of using the area measure tool. My understanding is that there are avenues that the applicant can pursue to construct within a floodplain. I think one is, it might be better to have stormwater staff speak to it, actually. Thanks.
Sat too far back, apologize. Ben Brown, Stormwater. Yes, so they can restudy the floodplain there too, to kind of get some more available area to kind of redevelop, as long as they can prove there will be no impact of any of their development on any adjacent property, either up or downstream. So that is a possibility to get some of it. So that could be one avenue. There's always the avenue that they can come to the council for a variance too as well, to get beyond just this rezoning that they would have to get as well. So there's a couple different avenues that they could take. I haven't necessarily seen a site plan for them or anything like that, so I'm not sure which way the applicant was heading on that.
Can you help me understand that first part? You're saying they could adjust what the floodplain is based on their own mapping?
So yeah, so they could basically remap Walnut Creek, showing that they were having no impact to it with their development and having no impact up and downstream on any of the flood levels or anything like that. So that is a course which is consistent with federal policy as well that they can go through to kind of show that kind of remapping exercise, for lack of a better term.
I see Wayne's got something.
There are development they can do in the floodplain as long as it's not filled.
Yes, and without a study, they can also do ground level uses like paths and things like that, as long as it stays at the natural topography of the area as well. So
What about like
6
parking areas?
Correct. So that could be there as long as it doesn't change the topography of the land.
So there can be a impervious surface
Correct. There
built
could be impervious surface.
on the floodplain.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's consistent with federal guidelines as well. So when we did the floodplain text change, we matched up with the FEMA federal guidelines pretty much for the most restrictive areas of the floodplain. So that's.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing then. Have 5 people signed up in support, and 1 person signed up in opposition. Is Madison Board here? Okay. We'll start with the applicant.
Good evening. Mac Paul here on behalf of the owners, Vanita and Anuj Mittal. Also have with me Ted Van Dyke, New City Design, and Daniel Watley, who's a landscape architect with Withers in Ravenel. So the owners own this land. They didn't put it under contract and, pursue an entitlement. And dependent on that, they acquired it, and you'll see some pretty detailed design because they've spent a lot of time and effort doing wetland delineation. And as Councilor Harrison asked a question about, there is some tolerance, I guess, about the geographic area of that. The undisturbed area would prohibit any tree disturbing areas. So there's an additional layer of protection on top of the floodplain protections that are in place. They did a tree survey, geotech assessment, and also worked with Parks and Rec on a recreation study, meeting them on site. But you can see, it's a wooded lot. There's a lot of development along Avent Ferry just to the north. And this shows you the main constraint of this property. You can see the topography is, and there are 2 parcels, so the yellow outline shows the smaller parcel to the south. And so to the extent you can develop this site, it really needs to be to the south. And that does create some issues because the one owner who's here tonight lives adjacent to the south. So we've tried to find a balance in trying to have a low-density development and buffering that you'll hear about, but also trying to keep the development as far away from the creek and the stream area as we can. This does show the condition about the minimum 6 acres. Again, that's just a minimum. We know it's going to be more than that. It's over half the site. And again, this kind of shows where the development would naturally occur to the south on the site. We also have a greenway extension, which the staff asked for, kind of putting it as far off of Trailwood as possible, directly connecting into the development. And Planning Commission asked to make that public. It is public. We also are really working hard to push the envelope on some green stormwater infrastructure. These are permeable pavers to the left and a bioretention area, which is really a natural area with plantings versus a wet pond, which is one of the 2 types of GSI that would be used to capture stormwater on the site. This just shows the type of greenway connection that connect the site to what is a really nice area along Walnut Creek. It kind of meanders, and there are potential seating areas and other things along the greenway. We had a lot of, and appreciate the neighbors' time and effort to meet and talk about this buffer area. And as I said, it's a tension point because, the further we push away from that property line, the closer it is into the floodplain. And of course, they would like it to be as far away as they can get it, and as natural as possible. There is a concern about evergreens. In the wintertime, it's a lot of deciduous trees. There's some really, based on the tree survey, some beautiful oak trees that can be preserved along the border, but underneath what we propose is to plant a very dense evergreen planting to provide some greater buffering. And we suggested it be anywhere in the 40 feet, and they want a certain portion of that buffer area not to have the plantings. This just shows on the top with the current zoning. It's kind of an odd situation because you have a PD with a residential development. Generally, a planned development is going to be a large mixed-use project. And this was kind of an interesting idea some architects had to build a modernist development a while ago that just never came to fruition. So you don't see many single-family residential PDs. But even with the PD, the buffer is smaller than what we're proposing, 30 feet. The UDO, we're rezoning it to R6, but limiting it to below an R4 density, which would have a much smaller setback. We're proposing 40 feet. All of our plans show the building at least about 45 feet from the property line. And you'll hear from the architect now about kind of the grading to work with the topography and to kind of bring the buildings down. Early on, we had proposed a 4-story townhome, which is a popular product, but the community didn't want the 4-story, so we limited it to 3. And we do have like a rooftop amenity on there. So with that, I'm going to let Ted Van Dyke come up and show you some of the renderings of the plan.
Good evening, everyone. Ted Van Dyke with New City Design Group. I think Mac gave you a good start on this. Because of the topography, one of the things that we tried hard to do was to set these buildings into the landscape. Anuj Mittal, the owner, was very interested in making sure that the community knew exactly what he was up to, rather than having a broad blanket rezoning and at some future point something may happen. This is the plan that we've come up with. One of the things we did do, and you can see as the building stepped down, is put the garages in the lowest basement level, and as the topography slopes down, those garages will be partly essentially underground. And it's a way that we can get 3 stories of townhome and a rooftop, but stay within a 45-foot R6 height. So we're not asking for any more height. We're not asking for anything out of an R6 envelope. And we're trying our best to be sensitive to the topography and find the best way to hide our cars on the site. This is sort of an aerial view, composite of our site and sort of an aerial view, kind of showing how the development sort of nestles in at that top of the site that Mac talked about, the highest points on the site, and then sort of caresses the floodplain below. And there is a distinction between not building buildings in the floodplain and leaving them completely undisturbed. So undisturbed means undisturbed. We can't grade in there. We can't get dirt from there. We can't work the landscape. We can't put retaining walls. So that's what we're trying to commit to have people understand. We're going to leave things as they are down there in that floodplain. And that's the way they should be. It's going to be, I think if you look back at that slide of our immediate surroundings, just along Avon Fair, there's a tremendous amount of impervious surface. There are developments that are almost 100% impervious. And for us to be able to create this sort of 6-acre preserve of mature trees in that floodplain and still have a viable development, I think is important. So going just back very briefly, talked about our basements and our garages, talked about our view. The other thing we're trying to achieve along Trailwood is to kind of create a nice suburban streetscape. We've pulled our buildings back from the street somewhat. We hope that some of the mature trees can stay, and if not, we'll replant Trailwood. We're talking with the city transportation about whether this really should be an urban streetscape, or maybe this is a multi-use path that has a bit more of a suburban character to match what's going on further down Trailwood, which really amazingly continues to have a bit of a rural character, even though it's so close to the city. So we're trying to get our units, we're trying to bring housing, but we're also trying to respect the character of our surroundings. Here's another view of that. This is looking at the entry to our development there, off of Trailwood, and you can get a little better look at the way we would stage that streetscape along Trailwood. Any questions?
Okay. Councilmember Harrison?
Yeah, just to talk a little bit more about the floodplain and stormwater. So I did note in the staff report that we could basically have some kind of no impact certification or a letter of map amendment that would truly protect all of the floodplain from any kind of fill or grading. Is that something that you all have considered or would be open to?
And it is time to bring up Mr. Watley from Withers and Ravenel.
Daniel Watley with Withers Ravenel, and not a stormwater engineer, but I have friends who are. So I'll try to answer as best I can. But we do have a full stormwater department at Withers Ravenel amongst all of our other civil engineers, and we have already run a no-rise feasibility study on this property. And essentially, my stormwater colleagues sent me a line that was a do not touch, do not cross line. And so they have run their modeling already. That was another investment that the owner made to understand what this development looks like and how it impacts what's downhill. And so we have actually already run that that study. We haven't submitted it to the city formally yet, but it is a draft that we have ready to go.
So does that mean you would be comfortable adding some kind of a condition that clarifies the no fill, no grade in the floodplain?
I think as long as it's just matching with FEMA and federal regulations, anything more aggressive than that, I would want to consult with my colleagues before I answered that.
Yeah, that's fair. I know I've also talked with Mac and the team a little bit about strengthening the stormwater conditions. I like the ideas of the bioretention ponds and the permeable pavers, but it doesn't tell us how much water is going to be treated from the site. And so that's also something I'm curious if you all are still open to,
Sure.
confirming.
And it looked like the conditions maybe weren't the last ones we sent.
Well, we can't submit until after.
Okay. So we offline, we could talk about that. We do actually have some updated conditions that propose a percentage of total impervious to be treated through green stormwater. And a lot of those images, like the pervious pavers, are honestly things that the owner has sent me already saying he wants to do. He just likes the look of the green everywhere, basically. And so, it's something we're actually equally excited about doing.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then also curious in terms of the year storms that you all are treating to. Is it anything above and beyond our regular, kind of the 10-year storms? Because I didn't see anything specific to that above 10 years.
At this point, we haven't proposed anything like that as a condition, and we've been deferring back to the UDO for the regulations related to peak flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be something to look at as well. I don't think there's any structural flooding noted in this case downstream, but I do live nearby and I've seen flooded structures just downstream. So I'm not sure I don't know if Wayne, if you can speak to that. How does the city keep track of, which structures have flooded?
Yes, we do have an internal database of any reports of structural flooding that we look that up as part of the plan review process, our plan review team. The issue here is there is flooding downstream, but this development, in order to kick in the additional provisions, would have to be more than 5%, right? 5% of the entire drainage area to the structural flooding. Because we're right next to Walnut Creek, that's a very large drainage area. So the amount of redevelopment in this lot would not come close to the 5%.
Okay,
provision.
but you do know of some flooded structures downstream near here?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
This is on Walnut Creek, so
Yeah.
there are structures in the floodplain of Walnut Creek downstream, clearly.
Yeah. The daycare, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I've seen a few myself, so I just was curious if you were aware too. Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So I think that's also something just that we can maybe further talk about is the right year mix on this. I do want to note, I think it's already clear that, there can already be a development put on this site. So it's kind of like can we get to I would say, a better development? And can we get to a development that really takes care of the environment as much as possible? So I appreciate the focus from the team on this. I know we've got some folks that are here to speak as well, so I'm going to stop with my questions for now.
Okay, thank you. I have one person signed up to speak. If we could put on 8 minutes, Madison Baird.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Beard, and I live directly adjacent to the Trailwood property we are discussing. Our property is 1126 and 1116 Trailwood Drive. It's the one being shown in the mock-up presented today, and we are the most directly impacted neighbors in this case. My family, my husband Shannon, and my 2 boys, as well as many of our neighbors in the Trailwood community are here. Please wave. Thank you. To show support for my opposition. Many of the members of the Trailwood community have also been attending meetings with the Matals and the development team for over a year, talking about this particular plan that they just showed you. And although I am one voice, I represent the members of our community who are here in attendance and those who could not be here with us today. So thank you for the opportunity to voice my opposition to this rezoning case tonight. Many of you are very familiar with this piece of land that we're talking about. I think at least 3 of you have walked the lines with us on our property, so I really appreciate that. A handful of you have visited our property and seen the unique lay of the land firsthand and experienced the calming white oak canopy that we get to enjoy every day. 2 years ago, our council at the time unanimously denied a proposal for apartments at this same location and commissioned the stormwater study to understand the impact that development along Walnut Creek and the surrounding wetlands is having on our ability to safely weather storms. The environmental concerns for this property still remain. Walnut Creek and Lake Raleigh have already been heavily impacted by the development of Arden Apartments on the corner through additional sediment. This very concern was highlighted by the council in the previous rezoning request for this property, and it is not clear what has changed in the intervening time, which would now support this type of development on this particular property. Fast forward to the end of last year, as we began discussions with the Matals and their team, we were very clear that we want this land developed. We want our community completed with transitional zoning, allowing for single-family or townhomes that will bring in new neighbors for us to get to know and enjoy. In the process, we want to be as environmentally responsible as possible. As I stand before you today, the primary concern we have is that the request for the R6 zoning is inconsistent with the development plan shared at a community meeting earlier this year, where an R4 designation would suffice with slightly different design. This discrepancy was even verbally acknowledged by the developer's agent during that particular meeting. In fact, this proposal has continued to be progressing without the developer addressing this discrepancy and has engendered distrust within our community that this plan is the true goal. Our reality is, if this rezoning goes through as written, there is no guarantee for us in our community that the beautiful mock-ups you saw on those slides will be built. The Matals and team are adamant that they are planning to develop this project, so why is this a rezoning case rather than a planned development? Why is this so important to us? Our worst case scenario is that you pass the rezoning and the property is sold to another developer who would only be beholden to the written conditions in front of you and the general R6 guidelines. And as this is a very real scenario, according to the Matals' history of acquiring large properties in Raleigh and flipping them to be developed by others. If the visuals presented tonight is the actual plan for the property, why would we not make that binding, offering our community protection from the potential overdevelopment of this land? There are a few minor comments we have about the conditions that we would like to be included, which you all have in your emails. And I have discussed directly with Councilmember Harrison in depth, and I feel she can accurately represent our concerns. Preventing the worst case scenario by making this a planned development would go very far to give us peace of mind. It will also ensure that the effort and input we seem to have had in this process does not get disregarded in the future. For these reasons, approving this rezoning request is premature. Thank you again for your time and the opportunity to speak regarding this case that hits so close to home. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Hold on. What questions do we have? The applicant, okay?
Something you stated, and I thought I heard the applicant state something different. Are you saying y'all are for townhomes?
We would be happy to have townhomes. We just want something that's very, low density. But the R6, just a R6 zoning scares us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jones?
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for bringing your family. I had the pleasure of meeting you guys earlier, and Jackson over there is a 4th grader who I would want to give some space if he's interested in coming and telling me how he feels about this project.
He knows the land probably better than any of us do, so.
I feel like that the deer would be scared off by the buildings because there would be a bunch of people messing around by the trees where they live, and they have a little hollow around that area, and they have been coming out into our side yard, and we have been placing salt licks and things out for them, and there have been a lot of animals around that area. Like, I have seen raccoons over there, and I've seen rabbits, snakes, lizards, and coyotes for some.
Heard some dogs for sure.
Well, not dogs. They weren't dogs.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. You did a great job. You sound like you really know the land. I really appreciate you telling us your thoughts. Thank you. That was really brave.
And he's very well dressed.
Yes. Councilmember Harrison?
Yeah, this would actually be a question for planning staff, and I'm curious about this idea of a planned development. Could you just tell us, what would that entail? So it does seem like they've got a plan here that, in general, the neighbors are in support of, but there are some tweaks. What would it take to get us to a planned development?
So a planned development, that's what is currently existing on the site today. That is a special kind of zoning district that has a master plan associated with it. So if that were to be a part of this discussion, we would need to probably start over and have the master plan submitted, go through staff review. A master plan wasn't included as a part of this review at this time.
Councilmember Fort?
Don't step away. So the current plan development is for single-family homes, though, right?
That's correct. 12 single-family homes.
Okay. Ken Bowers?
Yeah, sorry. Everything you just said was correct. I just wanted to add a little bit of elaboration. Ken Bowers from Planning and Development. So the applicant would already agree to refile as PD. I think the easiest way to do that without having them refile the case as a new application would be to send this back to Planning Commission, because obviously you've noticed the R6 zoning. You haven't noticed a PD application for tonight's hearing. But the other issue with PD specifically is, as currently written in the UDO, you have to have 2 different building types, and this is all townhouses. So they would have to include some other building type. Could be detached, could be attached, a duplex type thing, but they would have to do something in order to qualify to apply for PD zoning.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I I have a question about the conditions. I don't know if this is for planning or the city attorney's office, but I can appreciate the comments that, on paper we see R6, and that could be scary thinking of what could be built there by right if it's rezoned to R6 and the folks who are asking for this rezoning aren't the actual builders. But that's where the conditions come in, because the conditions always stay with the land. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to tighten up the conditions such that what is being proposed, which it sounds like the owners have every intent to develop, that becomes binding in a way. Like I'm sure you can't attach the actual renderings and be like, this is exactly what it's going to look like. But if there's a way to tighten up the conditions such that it's not really R6, it's tailored to this townhome project that it sounds like there's not a lot of heartburn about, and we know we need more housing. And if we can address the stormwater and the floodplain issue as well, I'm wondering if there's a way to do that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're happy to condition any element of this, which is, as Councilor Melton said, that's the way conditions are structured. I want to just point out, we do have a zoning condition that limits it to no more than 40 units over more than 11 acres. So it's actually less than R4 in terms of density. And you can actually do a lot more density because it's in a frequent transit area. So it's actually, with that zoning cap, it ensures that it would be the equivalent of below an R4. The only reason we didn't use the R4 is because of some of the dimensional standards with the conservation development option under R4 versus R6, because we do have to kind of put it within a confined area. So we tried to achieve the R4 concern through that cap. There are other elements to the townhomes, or just providing certainty about what's being shown. We're happy to do that, and that's kind of been the progress along the way, is through these conditions, is to address a specific concern, like, hey, I want to make sure you do X. Okay, well, let's come up with a condition. So we're happy to continue to look at those concerns.
Yeah, I think if there was a way to condition it so that we're really tight on what this is, that would provide more confidence. I did want to note another thing that I'd spoken to the neighbors about was within the 40-foot setback. I think there was a desire for an increase of the undisturbed area. And I just wonder if, Madison, if you could speak to that. Do you prefer undisturbed, or do you prefer the evergreens, or within that 40-foot setback?
It's a really great question. I think overall we prefer undisturbed, but we realize that they are going to have to create a huge retaining wall to achieve what you've just seen. So in our minds, our house is going to look like the house on the other side of the street with the giant retaining wall right next to the Arden apartments. And it's going to be look like a house on a hill, right? That it looks really odd. Undisturbed because the root balls of these giant trees are massive. And so we want to preserve the health of the oaks as much as possible. And then, like Jackson said, we want to make sure that the deer have plenty of room to bed down and, use our property as an oasis as well.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, we can kind of talk through that one a little bit more, I think. I think no matter what, I'm going to recommend that we continue this one. Stormy, did you have anything?
I had a question real quick for Ken Bowers. Since the property is currently under a planned development now, is there a way to actually amend the one that's currently on the property, or you have to start the process over?
Well, I mean, a PD amendment that is such a substantial change to the master plan is treated as a rezoning under the UDO. So it would be no different.
Okay. So I'm taking you would like to hold this and ask for the applicant to bring back some tighter conditions, also address stormwater.
Yeah, it's on stormwater, and then how do we make sure that what is planned is, really what's coming to be. I'm going to recommend it for January 16th, because I know our January 2nd date is pretty filled up. Is that okay?
Let me ask the applicant, would that work, January 16th?
That'll give us time to get the conditions in and all that. So I appreciate everyone that's here. I know this is an important area for folks who live nearby, and I really appreciate your input on this.
Okay,
Is
I'm
that your
going to
motion?
hold the hearing open, and if we could have a motion to move this to January 16th, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you. See you back here on January 16th. I know. Next, we have rezoning Z2623 Glenwood Avenue. No one has signed up in opposition.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. Request Z2623 would apply to 3 parcels totaling approximately 1.69 acres at 301 Glenwood Avenue, 617 West North Street, and 612 West Lane Street. There are several existing zoning districts in the area of request, and the applicant is requesting downtown mixed use, 20 stories, urban limited frontage, conditional use. The request would remove the North Boylan NCOD from the site, and Planning Commission recommends approval 6-1. The site is located between downtown commercial uses on Glenwood Avenue, the east part of the site, and institutional and office uses in the North Boylan neighborhood, the west part of the site. The area of request is near the Gramercy Apartments, just to the north, and the 222 Glenwood condos, and the Hibernian Bar is located on the same block. On screen are several views of the site showing existing uses. On the top left, you have the Glenwood Center building, which includes Plates Neighborhood Kitchen. And both views on the right show the existing surface parking lot and landscape architecture office on the site. The image on the bottom left shows an existing condo building. The applicant's proposing 3 conditions which prohibit some uses that are normally allowed in DX, propose the dedication of an easement large enough to accommodate an 8-dock bike share station, and propose that 1 public art installation be located on site. Approval of the request would increase entitlement, including increasing the max number of residential units, max gross office square footage, and max gross retail square footage. It would also change the build-to requirements. The site is partially within a downtown transition area and partially within the North Boylan NCOD. The site on the map to your right is shown in violet, downtown transitions in blue, and the NCOD in yellow hatch. The request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Although the request is inconsistent with part of the site's future land use map guidance for office and residential mixed use, it is consistent with the portion that's designated Central Business District, as well as the urban form map. Staff identified 14 comprehensive plan policies consistent with the request. The first of them shown here are generally concerned with higher intensity and more compact development near existing and planned transit, reinforcing the urban pattern and underutilized sites in downtown. And the next 7 are generally related to vertical mixed use, public realm amenities, reducing emissions, and urban design. Staff identified 3 comprehensive plan policies inconsistent with the request, which are related to future land use map consistency and transitions, buffering, and compatibility. Approval of the request would amend the future land use map to Central Business District over the area of request, like that. And Planning Commission recommends approval 6-1, as approval would increase the housing supply, allow a range of housing types, and permit more integrated land uses. Do you have any questions for staff before you open the public hearing?
Councilmember Fort?
The dissenting vote with the Planning Commission, do you know what it was based on?
Yep, Commissioner Peeler voted to recommend denial because the request does not address affordable housing.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't hear you.
Sure. Commissioner Peeler voted to recommend denial because the request does not address affordable housing.
This is about the third time this has come up. Has there been orientation for Planning Commission on what we can legally and not legally do?
David York, City Attorney's Office. Yes, we've talked about what can legally be required under the UDO versus what can be offered up as a voluntary zoning condition. But I don't edit the commissioner's comments.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We have any other questions? Okay. Thank you. No one has signed up in opposition. I'm going to open the hearing, and I think Molly Stewart is representing the applicant.
Good evening, Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, here on behalf of Blue Ridge Realty, the applicant. I do have with me this evening as well Joe Meyer and Lee Singleton from Blue Ridge Realty here in the back, in case we have questions for them. If you're not familiar with Blue Ridge Realty, you may have seen some of their buildings. You almost certainly have. They've been here in town a long time, headquartered in Raleigh, have owned this site since the early 60s, and they own 10 buildings in Glenwood South alone. They've also won the Sir Walter Raleigh Award for Community Contribution. Just a reminder on the urban form map that we are here in the downtown. You saw that laundry list of consistent policies from the comprehensive plan, and this accounts for many of those because we've said, big picture, this is where we want to put our density, put our mixed uses. It brings with it a lot of consistency with policies. So I wanted to turn to the reasons for this request and the reasons for some of the particulars of this request. This is the site today. You see the two-story building along Glenwood Avenue, largely surface parking here. We do have the two smaller structures as well. And this brings in some more specific policies. In addition to those urban form map policies, we do also have policies encouraging redevelopment of underutilized sites in downtown, as well as encouraging the scale and intensity of development that's needed to support our retailers in downtown as well. So let's talk about what downtown is, and this goes into a discussion of how we arrived at the height request that we did. So this is how the comprehensive plan defines downtown. In particular, I want to point out this kind of straight side that it has here in this location. As you know, downtown is self-buffering. It contains these transition areas within the downtown itself to protect neighborhoods just outside of it. And on this block, you see that in this part of downtown, the transition area is about 1.5 blocks wide, and about 1/3 of that is located on this block. So I want to go through each of these numbers differently because they represent somewhat different things. Starting over at the east, on the east side of Glenwood Avenue, we have already existing 40-story zoning there. And then to the west of the site, on the rest of the downtown transition, we have 7 stories noted there. Now, that's not the existing zoning. That is what the future land use map would support in that area. And of course, that's part of the transition that's protecting that 3-story height further to the west. So the problem to be solved here on this block was how do you get from the 40 across Glenwood all the way down to protect that 3 on the far side of St. Mary's. And there were a couple of options from the beginning. As you see, part of the site is not in the transition. It's right on Glenwood Avenue. It's just part of the central business district. And one thought was that perhaps that area could be 40 stories. We could then bring it down to 20 in that first third of the transition and bringing the height down more than half in the first third of that transition. So that was one possibility. In the end, the decision was simply start that transition even further to the east to make the whole site 20 stories and to do more than this section of the transition's share in creating that transition. So I want to jump ahead and talk about future land use map. You heard that there was an inconsistency. Oops, I think we passed it. There it is. Okay, so we heard that there's an inconsistency, and that's over here in this area where let me clear that, where we have the overlap with the office and residential mixed use. That's the blue color, and whereas the red is the central business district. So the inconsistency is only in that blue area. But I want to point out, so the central business district in red exists to the north and to the south of this bump out. And so the question sort of becomes, as you saw, this edge of downtown is a straight edge, so why does this bump out? Why does it have that unusual shape? And the answer is here. We have the NCOD that mirrors that shape. Those lines are the same. And so it makes sense if you step back and think about it that we wouldn't map an NCOD in an area that was designated central business district, right? So this NCOD accounts for that bump out in the office and residential mixed use. So I just wanted to point that out and also show, to the extent that we are in that NCOD, we are requesting to remove it. So removing that need to have a different designation other than the central business district. But to the extent that we are in the NCOD today, we are largely non-compliant with it and do not support it. The two big things this NCOD does is it limits height, and it requires that the parking not be in front of the building. So if you look up here in this corner, that is parking out in front. That would not be permitted if you wanted to build that new in the NCOD. On this site, it's simply a parking lot, surface parking. This building is compliant, however, or at least in general. However, as you see, it is not a building that is part of a coherent district. So to the extent that the NCOD in this area is working to preserve a district and a character, as you can see, there's not a lot left here. This is a small ribbon. It's a small portion of the site. So this is the request to remove that. And then finally, I just wanted to say a word. As you heard, we had the one vote against with respect to affordable housing. We are looking at that issue, and our request tonight is to hold. Although we are still looking at it, our intended proposal has two components to it. So two options, one being an on-site affordable housing component that would create 1% of any residential units to be affordable at 80% AMI for 5 years. Alternatively, to also be able to comply by contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund, $400 per unit. So that is the current thought, and we are happy to answer your questions.
Councilmember Patton?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, let me get out of gremlin mode right here. It's cold up here. The house that's left on the block that's compliant with the NCOD, what is the use of it right now? Is it owner occupied?
It is a commercial office.
Okay, thanks. That's the only one.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jones?
Thank you so much for, Thank you so much for your thoughts on the affordable housing component. Can you help me understand why 5 years? It seems like it's a short time, and what will they do in 5 years? Move?
It's a good question. So this is, I would say these are challenging times for development, and it comes back to the present value and what could be financed as a viable project today.
Challenging time for homeowners as well. Thank you.
I'll just say too, there's precedent for that. Previous council, not this council, but previous council has approved a rezoning that had units that were 5 years. So there is precedent for that.
2017 council.
Yes, not the previous council.
2 councils ago.
2 councils ago.
2017, so the 5 years is over for them now too. So the affordable.
It hasn't been built. Again, people can't get financing stuff right now.
Or homes.
Any other questions? Councilmember Harrison?
Yeah, thanks, Molly, for the presentation. Yeah, I do want to note that, this site does kind of straddle 2 different areas. And I think, when I look at it and there is an inconsistency in the future land use map, I think that is where the public benefits really should play in to ensure that, what is, kind of the additional entitlement available is really meaningful for all of our needs across the community. So I appreciate that you're willing to think about that, and I would recommend that we hold this. It sounds like, I think at least until January. I know, how many cases do we already have on January 2nd? Can someone tell me? 7. We have 7. I know I've got at least 2 cases here. Let me see, at least one more that I would like to move to January 2nd. So if we could move yours, Molly, to January 16th, that would probably help us, because we are trying to do like 8, I think, per public hearing session. Is that possible?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Could you make a motion?
That would be a motion to hold this until January 16th.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I've been recused on the next case, so I'm going to step out.
Okay. This is Z2723, the Dawson Assemblage. No one has signed up in opposition.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council members. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. Request Z2723 would apply to 3 parcels of approximately 2 acres located at 215 North Dawson Street, 300 West Jones Street, and 308 West Jones Street. The existing zoning is downtown mixed use 12 stories with an urban general frontage, and the requested district is downtown mixed use 40 stories, urban general frontage with conditional use. And Planning Commission recommends unanimous approval of the request. The site is located between the Longleaf Hotel and the Metropolitan Apartments. On screen are several views of the site, which is currently used as a surface parking lot. Proposed conditions prohibit certain uses that would normally be permitted in downtown mixed use. The applicant's also proposing 1 public art installation be located on site and is limiting the use of certain building materials. The request would increase entitlement on site, including increasing the max number of residential units and max gross office square footage. Upon approval, the max gross retail square footage and build-to requirements would not change. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the future land use map guidance for Central Business District and the urban form map. Staff identified several comprehensive plan policies consistent with the request, and the first group of them shown here are related to higher intensity and more compact development near existing and planned transit, and the urban pattern. The next group of them shown here are generally concerned with vertical mixed use, public realm amenities, and underutilized sites in downtown. Staff did not identify any policies inconsistent with the request. The Planning Commission recommends unanimous approval, as the request could increase the housing supply, increase the range of housing types available, and allow for more entitlement in an area with many transportation options. Do you have any questions for staff before you open the public hearing?
Any questions? Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Again, no one has signed up in opposition.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm Jamie Schwather with Parker Poe on 301 Fayetteville Street here on behalf of the applicant, the North Carolina League of Municipalities. We're joined by several of those members here today, and I know you all are probably familiar with the work of the League. I do have Rose Von Williams with me here today who will talk a little bit about their mission. But before we go into that, I just want to set the tone for the vision of this project, which is to create a repositioning of this property to be able to attract development and give the League back a home to remain downtown close to Jones Street, where it can do what it does best, is advocate for municipalities. And this will allow us to bring a new mixed-use building kind of back to the site. So I'd like Rose to kind of introduce a little bit about the League and tell the public a little bit about what this important nonprofit does for municipalities such as Raleigh and throughout the state. And then I'll explain the request to the council and take questions.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon or good evening, Council. My name is Rose Vaughn Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina League of Municipalities. I'm here tonight with our statewide president, who is William Harris, Commissioner from Fuquay-Varina, our statewide second vice president, Martha Sue Hall, who's Mayor Pro Tem of the city of Albemarle, has traveled here tonight, as long as our general counsel and assistant general counsel as well. We're a member, we represent more than 540 cities and towns in the state of North Carolina and all their employees and members. We are run by a 33-member board. We've been based out of Raleigh and on this property for over 47 years until we were displaced and are now off-site and did tear down those buildings because it was looking awful. We felt that was the best thing to do for that city. As a membership organization, we provide services to our cities and towns, whatever might be needed. Advocacy has been a primary goal, both at the state level, the federal level, legislative advocacy, in addition to appellate advocacy before the statewide courts when necessary, involving a municipal issue that's statewide, even before the United States Supreme Court when necessary. We provide public entity insurance to our members for workers' compensation, health, and property and casualty insurance, communication to our members, curating information that they need to know, a way to gather, conferences, education, what cities need to do to serve their members best and be the best they can be. We provide legal and HR advice, helping make difficult decisions, research and reports that are used by municipal staffs. The property at issue has been our home, as I say, for a long time. There's our services that we offer. With this, I'll turn back to Jamie Schwindler, and appreciate very much your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a picture of the site as it was in 2019. Now this is post the 2017 fire that destroyed the Met building that you see off to the left of the screen there. This is the reconstructed building. And following that fire, the rest of the buildings became a total loss and uninhabitable. And so since that time, the league has had to find other space in town to rent that space and to kind of vacate this property that they've held for so long. So since that time, they've gone and acquired the property and recombined it, and then positioned it for growth here. So this is an overview of the aerial of the site, and you can see how it's really well positioned on Capitol Boulevard along main infrastructure, where the policies of the comprehensive plan want to place people close to transit. It has a very high walk score. I think it's 91, and it has proximity to 3 different transit stops within the area. And then, of course, very proximate to Jones Street, as well as all of the other legislative buildings where it does most of its work. The request disappeared from the screen, but the request is to take this from a DX12 UG to a DX40 UG. The urban general is consistent with the comprehensive plan guidance here. The change is merely an increase from the 12 stories to the 40 stories, and that really was based on looking at what the comprehensive plan says about this site, the proximity to transit infrastructure, and the need for housing located in the central business district is exactly where you want to put this type of development, and really puts the league in a position to be able to attract a partner that can help it stay on site, perhaps having conference or other office space, but also an overbuild for other needed services throughout the city. And in that vein, it's very similar to the pattern of growth that the city has seen in the last 7 years since the league has been displaced. The site is shown on the screen in the yellow star. This is a graphic from the Downtown Raleigh Alliance showing the future skyline and kind of blending in with that pattern of growth that we've seen over time. The conditions were shown on the screen that were blank there, but they essentially mirror requests that we were discussing during the Planning Commission. This actually went to the Planning Commission 3 times, was deferred, and came back for us to add conditions to limit the uses, to limit the types of materials that would be consistent with other downtown developments, as well as add a condition for public art similar to the Longleaf Hotel that was approved. And in that vein, staff noted it was consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think it's remarkable to have a 40-story zoning where we haven't had anyone show any kind of opposition to the case, and it's completely consistent with the policies in the comprehensive plan. It really tells this council that this is exactly the type of project that you want here, because it's supported by all of those policies, and again, was supported by the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval that was unanimous. So listening to all of that input, we did take this case forward, but knowing that despite all that the consistency with the plans, there still is a desire for affordable housing. We would like to hold the case and be able to offer that affordable housing condition, which we weren't able to do between Planning Commission and here. We would like to be heard on January 2nd if there still is time, given that we were at Planning Commission for 3 turns. And our condition is modeled off that 1% that you've been seeing in several of the cases, the Maywood case and the South Wilmington Street case. But it's 1% of the difference of the overbuild from the 12 stories to the 40 stories based on the results from the Envision plan. So to simplify that, we've committed to, we're willing to offer a condition that would commit to 6 units of affordable housing units at 60% AMI for 10 years, or the option of a potential donation to the affordable housing plan at $40,000 per unit, which is similar and in line with the metrics that you have approved in other cases. We think that's reasonable and responds to some of the requests and interest that the council has shown for that important policy. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll have those conditions prepared and, of course, work with the staff and the city council, the city attorney's office to finalize those before coming back, if that's the council's wish.
Okay. Councilmember Harrison?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jamie, and thank you to the league, everyone, for being here and all the work that you do. Excited for you to have another downtown home soon. But yeah, I would like to hold this until January 2nd for y'all to come back, and appreciate the public benefit that you're willing to offer with regards to affordable housing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll see you back here
Thank you.
January 2nd. And I would just like to say it's nice to see underutilized land become utilized, especially for residential. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, I just want to highlight that the condition deadline is December 22nd. I think 10 days before. I just want to
City
make sure
Attorney?
It's December 22nd? Okay.
When are conditions required to be returned?
In order to make the January 2nd.
Councilmember York?
It's yeah, the 22nd of December. Yeah, that would be
Okay.
10 days out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Next, we have petition annexation AX 2623, also coinciding with rezoning Z 3123, both at 4317 Whitfield Road.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council members. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. This is a combined presentation for the requested annexation and rezoning of 4317 Whitfield Road. Please note that the City Council will need to act on the annexation request before acting on the rezoning request. And also, I must note that there is an error in the agenda description of the annexation request. The site is within Wake County's jurisdiction and is zoned Wake County R30. It's listed as R4. That is the requested zoning. The backup materials and all the other attachments are correct. The site is a 3/4 acre parcel south of the intersection of Battle Bridge Road and Whitfield Road. It is contiguous to Raleigh's corporate limits, and the applicants are requesting, as I said, City of Raleigh Residential 4 zoning. And for the rezoning, the request is consistent with the future land use map and comprehensive plan, and Planning Commission recommends unanimous approval. Switching gears back to the annexation request, the site is outside of Raleigh's ETJ, but contiguous to its corporate limits. There is a pre-existing single-family home on site. The property's well and septic systems were impacted by a development north of the site. Approval of the annexation request would allow the property owner to connect to Raleigh Public Utilities. And the property adjacent to the north of this site was annexed for the same reason. There are Raleigh water and sewer lines located along Whitfield Road. And it should be noted that the site is in an area of known fire service concern. The site does not meet the National Fire Protection Association standards for the arrival of a second company or the arrival of an initial full alarm assignment at a fire suppression incident. It's also worth noting that Raleigh Fire has submitted a request for proposals for fire master planning services. That was submitted on September 27th, and proposals are due December 21st of this year. The site area, let's try that again, is predominantly located near low and moderate scale residential uses. The closest commercial uses is west of the site, about 1 mile away at the Shops at Battle Bridge, which has a Food Lion, CVS pharmacy, and some restaurants. Here are a few different views of the site along Whitfield Road showing the existing single-family home. The requested zoning district would slightly increase entitlement on site. It would also decrease the minimum lot size for single-family attached and detached homes, and it would also allow townhomes to be built on site. The request is located within Phase 1 of Raleigh's proposed ETJ expansion into the Southeast Special Study Area. And as I mentioned in the overview, the request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. In addition to the future land use, the request is also consistent with policy regarding the zoning of annexed lands. And the inconsistent policy listed here is related to the area's fire service concerns. Planning Commission recommends unanimous approval as the requested district would allow smaller lots, greater unit density, some smaller setbacks, and an additional building type compared to existing Wake County zoning. Do you have any questions for staff before you open the public hearings?
Thank you for the presentation. Question for the city attorney. As far as, I was looking at backup materials, and as far as annexation, if we were to defer the annexation, what would those dates be?
Just for clarification, sorry, David York, City Attorney's Office. Just for clarification of your question, are you referring to deferring the effective date?
The effective date, yes,
Okay.
the effective date.
Because this property is in Wake County's planning jurisdiction, in other words, it's not in our ETJ, if you vote to annex and then defer the effective date, you do not have the authority to rezone the property until that effective date. So you couldn't act on the rezoning until that effective date.
Okay. This one's different.
Right? Yeah.
We've never had this. Yeah. Yeah, but you deferred yours and we approved the rezoning.
No, inside the ETJ, we can delay the annexation.
Yeah,
Outside the
outside the
ETJ, we have to annex immediately or deny,
Yeah.
of course.
But
I didn't
this.
give you the
We
answer
spent
you
a lot of
wanted,
time
but
getting
did I answer
educated
it?
on it.
Yeah. And the issue here is that they already have an issue with their well and septic.
That's my
is already
understanding.
being impacted. So
Right.
even if we were to deny it because there's an issue, they can still connect, correct?
No, if they're in our ETJ, then yes.
Okay, but if they have a known issue with their well and septic.
Yeah, we can go into the county without,
That's what I thought.
I think is it right?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, we can provide them utilities at outside service rates if they're not annexed, even if they're in the county's jurisdiction, if it's under one of those emergency circumstances.
And a denial would make it qualify, is that correct? I'm
The
sorry,
requirement-
I meant to ask this sooner, but.
No problem. And you can make your way up.
'Cause
My
this
understanding
makes-
is the requirement is that they file an annexation petition. okay? Once you act on it,
then we can do
they
the
can't
rezoning.
control.
Right. But as far as, let's push that to the side. As far as well and septic issues, if there's a well and septic issue, even if they came to us and asked to be annexed to connect and it was denied, they still could connect because there's an issue with well and septic. Is that my correct understanding?
That is correct. We have done that in the past. All we need is a letter from Wake County saying that there's a problem with the well or septic. And then we would bring it to council, and council could approve that connection.
Okay. So we got multiple issues here plus fire. Okay.
Okay, no one has signed up in opposition. Remind me, we open the public hearing for the annexation first and then the rezoning. Okay? Here to speak for the applicant is Ashley Terrazas.
Good evening, Mayor Baldwin, members of council. My name is Ashley Honeycutt Terrazas with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street. And I don't have a long presentation, but I'm going to kind of go through what's going on here and kind of, 50,000-foot view of the reason for this request for Ms. Emmons' property. Just a, quick high-level overview. This is not just a redevelopment. She has a single-family home. She would like to keep it that way. The real request for the annexation is, as you can see, there's now sewer line on her property that was installed by a developer, and she would like to connect to that sewer and water. Her neighbor just to the north, 4301 Whitfield Road, was annexed. The ETJ had been extended to that property previously, but it was not extended to hers. That property was annexed back in April so that they could also connect to the utilities running through their property. So really this is about, again, being able to annex into the utilities that are now adjacent to her property so that she can have water and sewer provided by the city. And I know that there's known fire service issues in the area, and those are, as Matthew mentioned, that we're working on a plan for those as a city, and for a single family home likely would not have much impact, especially her neighbor also just recently annexed. And again, that shows the kind of zoomed out version of the sewer line running through this area to serve the other developments that are right here in this area, and she just wants to connect to the new utilities. And these are the consistent policies. Oh, excuse me. Consistent policies from the staff report. And so again, the property owner has utilities running through her property and would like to connect to them, and that's the purpose of this request.
Yeah. So because the backup said there was an issue, so is there an issue or she just wants to connect?
She wants to connect to them because they're running through her property now. I don't know if we have something from the county saying that it rises to the level of there needs to be an emergency connection. Yeah, this is Katie with Gander, who might have some more information on that.
I didn't plan to speak, but Katie Hamilton. There's a separation issue. Sorry. There's a separation issue currently. There are minimum separation requirements.
Okay.
Those well and septic aren't currently failing, but there are separation requirements that are no longer being met.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
Not for the applicant, it's kind of really for council, because here we're in a query where we have two competing health issues. And what I mean by that is we have a well and septic health issue, and we have a fire response issue. And trying to balance which one is greater, in a sense, is difficult. But the applicant is fully aware of our fire response challenges and issues. Is that, oh, okay.
Do we have fire here tonight?
Well, the chief's here.
Oh, there's the chief. And who is the current fire response assignment? Is it us right now?
I think it backup says Garner.
Yes, we would share that with Wake County as well. Engine 26 will be the actual apparatus that will respond, engine 26 and 21. So we would send 2 apparatus there.
Okay. Right now today.
Correct, right now, yes, ma'am.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't know that we've done the hearing yet, but no one's signed up. So I'm just going to say, it's my understanding, though, that they're requesting R4. It's one single-family home, and it's owner-occupied. Is that right? And so to your point on I think that the impact on whether we annex this or rezone is going to be very small compared to the annexations and rezonings where we're looking at multiple developments. And so I know we haven't opened and closed the hearing yet, but my thought is one single family home, downzoning to R4, wants to hook up, owner occupied. I don't have that many concerns about it personally. It'd be a lot different if it was someone trying to build a multitude of housing. Yeah.
Right. And I feel the same way, but I wanted to make sure I put all the information out there for all council members.
Yeah.
And to understand the challenge here.
And I think to add to that, like we saw the map of the Sessa area and the Hodge Road assemblage, which has a dedication for fire. So at some point in the future, there will be better fire service in that area.
Yeah, maybe over at a new training facility.
The hearing obviously has been opened. I'm going to close it. Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of annexation.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. Next is the rezoning Z31 case, and I will, again, no one signed up in opposition. I'm going to open the hearing. Ashley, if you would like to say anything. Okay. Any questions? Okay, then I'm going to close the hearing.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated December 5th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you. All right, next we have rezoning Z3523. 2 people have signed up to speak in opposition. We'll hear from staff first.
Good evening again, Sarah Shaughnessy, Planning and Development. So this is a request to rezone just under 18 acres from conservation management with this special residential parking overlay district to residential mixed use, 3 stories with green frontage conditions and that same overlay district. Staff have found this request consistent with a comprehensive plan, inconsistent with the future land use map, and the Planning Commission, when they heard this case, provided no recommendation. So here is an aerial view of the site. As you can see, it is east of Lake Johnson, south of Avent Ferry. The site is currently forested and vacant. There are 11 proposed conditions, so I'll go through them one by one. The first condition prohibits most uses that would otherwise be allowed in a residential mixed-use district, but allows multifamily residential. So that would be pretty much the only use that is allowed. The second requires that rental fees for all dwelling units on the property be affordable for households earning an average of 60% of the area median income for no less than 30 years. There is a cap on the number of dwelling units at 140, so that's the total number of units that could be built on their property. Conditions also prohibit any dwelling units between the pins or properties to the south within 335 feet, and I have an image on the next slide to show you what that looks like. Also prohibits any construction improvements or development within 100 feet of Walnut Creek, and also prohibits development within the 100-year floodplain. So just showing you what those 3 conditions look like roughly, an estimation based on a screenshot from IMAPS, but just showing you that the development can mostly be concentrated in the sort of top portion of the site here. Condition number 7 requires the developer to construct a privately maintained greenway within a public easement. So that would be privately constructed, privately maintained, but accessible to the public since it's in an easement. The property owner shall delineate a minimum of 30% of the property's net site area as tree conservation area. Also requires that prior to the first certificates of occupancy, the property owner delineate any undisturbed area and deliver a written grant to bona fide land trusts or conservancies. And then also provide sufficient stormwater mitigation for up to 25-year storm events. So the runoff between pre-development and post-development for 25-year storm events. And then the final condition is that the developer shall include a bioretention area sized to treat 25% of the water quality volume for the whole site. So that's the 11 conditions. Again, looking at the existing and proposed zoning, this would allow for the development of 140 new units. Inconsistent with the future land use map designation of private open space. Would be consistent with the urban form map here. Consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. A number of consistent policies here. The main inconsistent policies being the inconsistency with the future land use map. And then again, Planning Commission offered no recommendation. They recognize the sort of dual priorities between providing affordable housing on the site as well as protecting environmentally sensitive areas. They did make this recommendation after one meeting in acknowledgement of the timeline for affordable housing funding so that they could apply for this grant cycle. And they requested consideration of additional zoning conditions, and the applicant has honored that request. So the full recommended action is included in your backup if you want to see the exact language there.
When is the deadline for filing for tax credits, the application?
I believe the applicant can answer that question.
Okay.
So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer other questions.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Patton?
Hi. So the Envision chart shows that no housing units can be built. Can you explain what is allowable in conservation management? Because it's something different, it's something in between not touching it at all and actually building units.
Yeah, that's correct. So the allowable uses per the UDO are parks and open space, which might include greenways, trails, fields for recreation, minor utilities, and restricted agriculture. So some limits on the type of agriculture that could be there. And then cemeteries as a very limited use.
So they could cut down, how much land could they clear?
So they are required, if a tier 2 or tier 3 site plan is submitted, they are required to dedicate 30% of the area as tree conservation, which is the condition that they have offered as part of this case.
But then the things you just described, would they trigger a tier 2 or a tier 3 site plan?
So I think it would depend on the exact activities, perhaps not all of them, but some of them may.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing. We have Toby Coleman representing the applicant, and then I have 2 people signed up to speak in opposition, Ann Franklin and George Jones.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Toby Coleman, 150 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the property owner as well as the affordable housing developer who's seeking this rezoning, Kelly Development. With me here today is Ted Halbron with Kelly Development. We also have Chris Bostic with Kimley Horn, who is the project engineer, if there's any technical questions. And we also have Joe here with, I don't want to murder his name. I asked him his name a couple minutes ago and I blanked on it in front of y'all. So rather than murdering his name, I'm just going to admit that and move on. And so Joe is the architect for the project and so can answer any specific questions related to that. So There's a lot of questions on this project. This is one that does provide a lot of, I think to use a term that's been used a lot of public benefits because it's solely for affordable housing. But obviously, it's being proposed on a property that's currently zoned conservation management, so there are some questions and concerns. What you see here is the overall sort of project concept for the site. As you can see, and as Sarah mentioned, the developable area is really focused sort of on the northern side of the property here. It is currently, we estimate it's about 90 to 100 units and about 7.23 acres of developable property after all of these zoning conditions which limit development. That will end up preserving about 10 acres or about 55% of the property. One of the things that I do want to note up front is that we did take this to the West Raleigh CAC as part of our process, and they voted unanimously to recommend actually approval of this rezoning. I think part of that really has to do with the fact that there's a widespread recognition of the need for affordable housing. I'm not breaking any new news here. I know many of you guys spend a lot of your time working on that. This is a map actually from the city. It's affordable housing projects financed by the city since I believe 2016. One of the things you'll note, not much on the west side of town. So we've got our Gorman Street site, and then the only other site, this is the Hampton Springs project. It's a senior, I believe, a 57-unit project. So that's your affordable housing on the west side of town. There's a big need overall in the city, and it's just getting bigger. We did have some conversations with Housing and Neighborhoods, and they indicated that the shortage is actually going up, estimated to be about 31,000 units citywide by 2025. I mentioned to you, I've mentioned to I think all of you that the state actually did a market study in connection for the preliminary applications of this project, and they looked at an area, about a roughly 25 square mile area in West Raleigh as being sort of the market area for this project. It's the area west of downtown, south of Wade, and east of Edwards Mill. And what they found was there's about 5,200 low and moderate income households. That's 30 to 70% area median income. Lowest incomes are in the 20,000s. A family of four making 70% AMI is probably getting close to $70,000. So it's a wide range, but people who all need help. And these are people that you're either paying too much of their pre-tax income in rent or are in substandard housing. So that's the need. There's about 170 units, I believe, that they estimated were available. So huge need just in this slice of town. One of the questions we heard from neighbors, and we do want to just emphasize this, why here? Well, there's a lot of site features that make this a great site. Obviously, it's on Gorman Street, just south of Avent. It's very accessible. It's on a frequent transit corridor. It's got access. We did a site visit with some of the council members on Saturday. We parked at the nearby shopping center with a food line, and we walked down there. So it's got walkable access to amenities and job centers, and it's right next to the Walnut Creek Greenway, so it's got some great access to nature. It's a unique site. This would be a site that would be gobbled up by private developers and probably be too expensive for an affordable housing developer. But it's been, obviously, because it's Zone CM, other folks have tried to develop it as market rate housing, and council said, no way. So to be frank with you, when this came in, when I started talking with Ted about this, we said, the only way this thing's going to get developed is if it's affordable housing. And so we've tried to be really thoughtful with that. Here are the concept renderings. I show that just to show that, they're really trying to do a high quality product here. These are renderings that have been already submitted to the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, which is the group that issues tax funding. This is a 4% project, so it's not a competitive project. The deadline for the 2024 cycle is January 15th. What Ted likes to say, and what he repeatedly told the neighbors is what they try to do is build a project where the only way that you can tell it's an affordable project is if you looked at the rents, right? He wants to have a project that you can look at and say that's a high quality project, and we think he's done that here. Councilor Patton, to your question, obviously, if there was a site plan filed, a tier 2 or tier 3 site plan, you'd have to dedicate tree conservation area. We did go to urban forestry and ask them, well, what if you just wanted to clear and grade the site? That does not require a site plan. It's a different process. And then you just have buffers as set out by the UDO. I believe it's 50 feet along the road and 30 to 60 feet along the borders. We estimate somewhere between 7 and 9 acres to be cleared today, depending on if you could clear in the 100-year floodplain. So the CM zoning conserves about 8 to 10 acres today. So not the entire tree canopy would be preserved even under current zoning. We've tried to honor that by obviously preserving a lot of the area under zoning conditions. So this is similar to the map that Sarah showed you earlier. The only thing we've added obviously are the river buffers here, which conserve a little bit more area. So about 7.23 acres is developable. We've tried to be thoughtful and heard both what the PEJ has said when we've been able to talk with them about wanting green stormwater infrastructure. We do have that condition. We've currently got it located here. That may move depending on sort of conversations we continue to have. We are looking at doing more tree conservation area than even the 30%. As you can see, there's some tree conservation area even in the developable area as we're planning, and we are prepared to increase our zoning condition in terms of the minimum tree conservation area required. Part of the planning would include a new sidewalk there connecting the site up to the amenities and the bus stop. This is the Greenway. You can see the Greenway connector. So we're really trying to make this something where we can benefit both the people and the environment. The other thing that we are prepared to provide, and I'm running out of time, so I'll be quick, is a limit on the impervious surface. So in the most sensitive watersheds, the city, when you're talking about Swift Creek and Walnut Creek, the city provides that the limit on impervious is 30%. We can meet that. And so we're prepared to offer that as a zoning condition as well. Finally, I'll say just when we went on our site visit last week, one thing that we all noticed was there was already somebody with a tent out there. So the housing need is real, and thank you very much.
Toby, thank you. Can I follow up on a couple of questions?
Sure.
Can you go back to that slide that shows what can currently be done under current zoning?
So that's clearing and grubbing, basically. So that's the tree area that we estimate could be cleared.
Well, okay. And I'm sorry I had to cut you off. You were going over time.
Yeah.
But
that's my fault.
Did you said you saw a tent out there?
Yes.
So people are living there.
Yeah, we saw one tent. We didn't necessarily see somebody in it, but I think we saw a tent, we saw a bicycle, so we presume that at least one person or a group of people were living there.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions for the applicant? Councilmember Harrison.
Thanks, Toby. Let's see. I just want to go back to that one map you had about affordable housing in West Raleigh. I was curious, what does that represent? You're saying there's just one other development or just one other?
This is developments, and I'm going to pull up. I brought a copy of it because I wanted to make sure so it is city-funded affordable rental developments since 2016.
Okay, because we do have a lot of sites around there. I just want to note, I know this area pretty well, so we've got, we just approved a new site in this area south of Western Boulevard, and it's going to be permanently owned by the city. So it's not built yet, but we did approve that this summer. And then we've got a number of properties up around Method that are, affordable housing through the Raleigh Housing Authority. And then very close to this site, all along Avon Ferry Road, there's a ton of naturally occurring affordable housing. And so we've got some, low-income census tracts that are around here with, again, a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing. So I just wanted to note that it's not that it doesn't exist right around here.
Yeah.
But I definitely appreciate the point that we need more affordable housing. And I think that is, to the Planning Commission's position that they didn't make a recommendation, but they talked about, the whole question here on this case is, we've got two kind of competing interests, the conservation piece, the protection that this offers to the Walnut Creek watershed, and then affordable housing, which we need. So I think that's just kind of what we're wrestling with. But let's see if I had any questions.
And while you're looking, I do want to note that we, in the market study that the state did, they identified, I think, 8 projects that are sort of generally within this area, but, sort of downtown west. And so that would be stuff that has been built prior to 2016 as well. I think they identified about 500 units.
Okay.
So, again, not anywhere meeting the need, but definitely more than is shown on the map of 2016. Again, I was showing that just because this is a city map that shows the progress of what's been built.
Gotcha.
Or what's being built.
Could I ask one question? I asked of staff, they said they didn't know, and I'm not sure of this either. What is the deadline for applying for low-income tax credits?
January 15th. So,
January 15th.
Yeah. Now, I will say that, obviously we, just to give you some background, we've worked very hard to try to meet that deadline. That being said, we do appreciate that we've wanted to try to make sure that our zoning conditions were in the best shape possible. So part of it was on us because it came back to y'all a few times because we needed to get our zoning conditions right before we came to hearing. So some of that delay has been on us. Obviously, if there's anything we can do between now and January 2nd to make that work, we would appreciate the opportunity to do that. We've worked very hard to come up with as many conditions and address all the issues that we can, but we understand and are willing to work with council however you guys want to handle that.
Mayor Pro Tem?
If you don't get a decision on this case before the request for LIHTC project this year, would there be any appetite to continue with the rezoning for next year? Okay.
Yes, the intent would be that if we don't get it the intent from Kelly Development is that if they can't submit this year, they are prepared to go through the cycle again for 2025. It's got a lot going for it in terms of low-income housing tax credits. This goes a little bit beyond your question, but if I have that leeway, it is in what's known as a qualified census tract. What that basically means is that you get basically more in tax credits than you would if you were outside of one of those qualified census tracts. And basically what that means is they get more money from tax credits, and so they need less gap funding. And so they think it's a beneficial project for a lot of reasons. And frankly, it's just, I know that you guys are seeing some projects. It's hard to find projects. It's hard to find land for these projects. And so it's a unique site.
Just quick, are you going for a 9% or a 4%?
4%.
Aren't the 4% throughout the year? Can staff?
If I could ask Ted Halbrun to come up, he can answer that question.
Yeah, because I know the 9% have a hard, but I think 4% they rolled.
Thank you. Ted Halbrun, 1702 Midwood Drive. The 4% cycle is open throughout the course of the year, but it shuts off at the end of the year. And so our only thought is we want to make sure we get the project right, find the right conditions, and if that means that we'll take this through in 2024, so be it. There is a deadline, but the truth is we want to make sure that we get the right balance here on conservation and affordable housing. So if that means that we apply next year and start the cycle over again, we're fine with that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to note kind of our site visit, kind of experience, which maybe isn't a question, but a few of us did go out there on Saturday, and the site, there is a lot of varied topography, and we've got several blue line streams on the site, so that means tributaries that are going into the Walnut Creek. And so it's just kind of these, again, thinking about that stormwater, the runoff issues, water quality issues, flooding issues that go downstream to the Walnut Creek that are, I would say, still on my mind and is kind of what gives me pause. But I don't have anything else to add beyond that. And I know there are some folks also here to speak on this case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions? All right, then if we could set timer to 8 minutes. Anne Franklin and George Jones have signed up to speak in opposition. Can I ask, are you taking all 8 minutes?
I'll do my best to keep it under 8 minutes.
No, you will keep it under 8 minutes, but what I'm asking is, both you and Ann have signed up to speak. Are you speaking, just you?
I'm just speaking.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Raleigh City Council, and my name is George Jones, 813 Darby Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. This evening, I'm representing Partners for Environmental Justice. I'm the Executive Director. And I wanted to just address a couple of concerns that we have representing Partners for Environmental Justice. This case, Z3523, to put it bluntly, we don't want to pit the need for affordable housing against protecting the communities, especially along Walnut Creek watershed. We're not interested in doing that. However, we know that this is an area that's degraded in terms of the creek bed. Flooding and trashing has been a consistent in the Walnut Creek watershed area, and the access of threatening rain heavily impacts the communities living in downstream. This property has been designated as a conservation management property for decades. It's had steep slopes to someone else has said that. Not only does it have steep slopes, it also has a lot of varying topography, and we also know that it impacts the wildlife habitat located in this area as well. Regardless of how the land is engineered, the result substantially subtracts from the critical capacity to slow down and absorb creek waters. There's a lot of tributaries that run through this property that obviously impact the creek, Walnut Creek. It's right below the Lake Johnson dam restoration area, and so we see that that's a potential area of impact. We're mostly interested in seeing affordable housing. However, these green space areas often are the locations for development, and our challenge to address the affordability for housing against the properties that are green spaced areas, creates a huge concern for us. We also, in addition to PEJ, have been working with other stakeholders, and we know that Sound Rivers submitted a proposal. I think all of you all received that. And we stand by not only their issues and concerns, but our issues at PEJ to request that the Raleigh City Council exercise their authority to deny the rezoning for this 17-acre property.
Anybody have any questions? Councilmember Harrison.
No questions, but I just thank you all coming out from, and this is just to confirm, George, are you representing Partners for Environmental Justice? Yeah, okay, just to make sure. And I did receive the document from Sound Rivers, and so I know they do have concerns about erosion and stormwater runoff, and then planning for, the stormwater impacts and all of that. So I just really appreciate that you all have been active in providing input on this case. I don't know if anyone else has questions for George or PJ.
I don't have any questions. I guess I'm more of a statement. This property backs up to the other property on Trailwood that we just heard the hearing about. And so there's, something of a situation when you've got two properties that are, pretty adjacent, and you've got folks on both sides of the property line saying, we've got some concerns about conservation, impact on the environment, impact on wildlife, things along those lines. And so it may be something that we have to take a little bit more of a holistic view, because we've got two properties or two rezoning cases coming in front of us with equal issues about the environment. So I just want to raise that.
I just want to say this too. What can be done by right now? I mean, that's a lot of land that could be just bulldozed down. I'd rather see protections than just kind of leave it like that. That's kind of how I feel about it. But I think you have been interested in taking this to committee?
Yeah, that's what we've talked about. And I will say on the potential for clear cutting, I guess I'm just going to say I'd be surprised if that was a plan, just because I don't know what the goal would be of doing that. So, this property has been under conservation management for, I don't know if anyone knows, but I think decades. So it's not, I would say, my biggest concern. I think one of the reasons I would want to move it to committee is to better understand the conservation management zoning and the purpose of it. What was the intent originally with this property? How did it get this designation in the first place? I'd also be curious if staff has any ideas. I know this may sound a little odd, but could we do a trade? Do we have another property there where we could work to do affordable housing in the area that the city perhaps owns, that is not cutting down a mature forest? Half this property is also in the floodplain. So it's the same kind of issues. And, it is a cumulative impact when we think about these various developments near each other. My recommendation would be to move it to GNR, Growth and Natural Resources, if we could, at the end of January. I know we already have a topic there that I don't want to shift the date, so we might have to do both at the same time if the GNR committee is amenable. That would be at 4 p.m.? Yeah.
I have nothing but time.
Okay, good. All right. Councilmember Branch is available. That's great. So that would be my motion, would be to move this case and hold it, I guess, for discussion at the GNR committee. And again, just to staff, in terms of what would really be helpful, would be to consider, again, conservation management zoning. What is that about? What's that for? What's the purpose? The history, specifically this parcel would be really helpful. Any kinds of information that you have about the Walnut Creek watershed impacts there. And then certainly that's also a time when the public can come if you want to have more discussion. That's typically something we can do in a committee meeting.
Right, I'm keeping the hearing open in case additional conditions, you want to submit those. So there's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And next, our final rezoning is Z3723 Needham Road. No one has signed up in opposition.
Hi, Bronwyn Reedus with Planning and Development.
I apologize, Mayor. Did we confirm a date certain when we held open the hearing?
So it's going to GNR committee at the end of January. That would be the 23rd, January 23rd.
But when does it come back here? Is that the question?
Yes.
February, it had to be February 6th. If we
First
get it
meeting in
out.
February.
Yeah, if it moves out of committee, right?
But we have to give a date certain.
Okay,
So
then
we could
February
push
6th would be the next available date.
Okay.
Well, February 6th would be the date it's expected to come back.
Right. Do you think we'll
But-
solve it? Sorry. Do you believe we'll get it out in our first hearing, in our first time?
That would be my guess, yeah.
Okay. If that's the result, then I would say February 6th.
Do we need to vote again?
Well, just to add that, yes, to confirm.
I move to amend the motion that it goes to committee for January 23rd and come back to the full council on February the 6th.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you. Good catch, City Attorney. Thank you.
All right, Bronwyn Reedus with Planning and Development. Next case on the agenda is Z3723. This is a request to rezone a little bit over 1 acre from residential 4 with a special highway overlay district 1 to residential 10 with conditions with that same overlay district. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and Planning Commission recommended approval unanimously. The site is located just east of 540, kind of in the southeastern quadrant of the intersection of 540 and Buffalo Road. This area, as you can see, is heavily wooded and kind of undeveloped today, but it is an area that has seen a lot of development approvals recently. The latest would be Annexation AX 2823, which was approved November 21st at the November 21st meeting with an effective date of June 30th, 2024. Other developments that have been approved in this area include some townhome developments, single-family home developments, apartments, as well as commercial, including a Publix, a Sheetz, and a multi-tenanted commercial buildings as well. Here are some views of the site. Today, there is one single-family home existing there. The applicant has proposed 3 conditions here, prohibiting some uses, so prohibiting boarding house, outdoor sports or entertainment facility, bed and breakfast, and hospitality house, also prohibiting the apartment housing type, and then limiting number of dwelling units within a single townhouse building to just 7 units. Entitlement is increasing here, going from 11 to an estimated 27, so a little bit more than a double an entitlement increase. The requested zoning district is consistent with the community mixed use future land use designation, contributing to that larger commercial and residential node. It is consistent with a number of policies in the comprehensive plan. It's inconsistent with the conditional use district consistency policy. That's being flagged just because of the limit on apartment building types. That's not really consistent with the intent of community mixed use future land use designation. And then zoning and infrastructure impacts is also being flagged. This is located in an area of known fire service concern. So it's missing the mark on the NFPA standards for the arrival of a first initial response and then the arrival of the full response. The Planning Commission did recommend approval unanimously, finding that the request would allow for additional housing supply and variety in an area near several approved commercial developments. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have before you open the public hearing.
Okay, any questions? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. I believe we have Worth Mills here speaking for the applicant. No one has signed up again in opposition.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Worth Mills on behalf of the rezoning applicant and the property owner. Before I dive into the presentation and something that you've heard a lot of tonight, we are going to request a deferral of a decision to January, whether that be the 2nd or the 16th, in order to include a condition that would offer a contribution to the City of Raleigh Fire Department to help address some of the fire response concerns in this area. So Z37 again would increase the allowable density from 11 to 27 units. The goal of this rezoning is to incorporate this parcel into the already approved subdivision that surrounds us to the south, the north, and the west. And again, we think that will make a more cohesive subdivision overall. The site is kind of a donut hole, low-density zoning within the Buffalo Road, Forestville intersection. Today, the conditions that we have proposed are pretty much verbatim from the Chapel Towns development that, again, was approved in November 2021 and then annexed on November 21st. You can see the existing subdivision here with the crosshatched 5116 Needham Road parcel. And this is the proposed incorporation of 5116 into the existing subdivision. We remove a cul-de-sac and we create a better connected project overall. Again, our team has had multiple conversations with Councilmember Patton. We've agreed on a $20,000 contribution to the City of Raleigh Fire Department. And again, we would like to bring this back in January so that we can include that condition. But happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, we will then leave the hearing open. Do you have a motion for deferral?
Yeah, I'll just motion to defer to January 16th, and I'll look forward to seeing your condition when you bring it back.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
That was unanimous. I'm sorry, what?
Clarify, is the hearing closed in order for them to bring the condition, or are you, is it going to be
It's still
going to be
open.
open, just proposed?
Yep. Okay, that was the last of our hearings. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here.